About 2 weeks ago, we talked about a case that was out of the Northern District of Illinois concerning a non-citizen and the ability to carry firearms. And this was a case where a federal judge reviewed the documentation and ultimately said the non-citizen here, undocumented, could have a firearm for protection, and that laws prohibiting non-citizens to not have firearms is unconstitutional and an infringement of the Second Amendment. An interesting case. It's got people split on how they're reacting to this. Welcome in, Bishop on Air. I'm Greg Bishop. Thanks for hanging out. Like, subscribe, hit that notification bell, and hang out with us each and every weekday morning. Some fascinating conversation about this. Now, when we talked about it 2 weeks ago, there have been subsequent headlines across the country, even on Fox News, talking about this ruling, essentially saying that the individual in this case, a undocumented migrant in the United States illegally, can have a firearm. And let's just take a look at some of the language there. And this is from my report at thecentersquare.com. You had Judge Sharon Johnson Coleman rule in favor of Herberto Flores, a foreign national in the U.S. illegally, who is charged with unlawful use of a firearm. She said that the law violates the Second Amendment as applied in this one case. The court, she said, quote, finds that Flores' criminal record contained no improper use of a weapon, as well as the nonviolent circumstances of his arrest do not support a finding that he poses a risk to public safety, such that he cannot be trusted to use a weapon responsibly and should be deprived of his Second Amendment right to bear arms in self-defense. The judge wrote, thus, this court finds as applied to Flores, the law is unconstitutional. When we talked about this, obviously there was the initial reaction of people saying, oh my gosh, non-citizens can have firearms. But then you have the others on the other side who say, oh, that essentially means that the laws in place in Illinois prohibiting people from getting a firearm, like the firearm owner ID card, a hurdle that law-abiding citizens have to jump through, is unconstitutional. And that was exactly something that State Representative Dan Calkins had to say on the House floor on Friday. He brought this very issue up, and let's hear what he had to say on Friday.
I want to thank Judge Sharon Johnson Coleman for establishing the legal precedent that you don't need a FOID card or a concealed carry license to own a gun in Illinois. That's right. The state of Illinois has refused to prosecute Mr. Flores for owning a pistol and carrying it on his person without a FOID card or a concealed carry permit. Now, it doesn't matter that he broke the law when illegally entering this country. It doesn't matter that he broke federal law that prohibits any non-citizen who is not legally authorized to be in the United States from possessing a firearm. So here's the questions, ladies and gentlemen. How did this case ever get to court? Where was the AG in prosecuting this criminal? Where is the state's attorney prosecuting this criminal? Where's the Moms Demand Action going after this criminal? Why shouldn't gun owners across the state cut up our FOID cards and be able to buy guns out of state with no worry? Again, I want to thank Judge Johnson Coleman for making the FOID card irrelevant and law enforcement in Illinois for finally admitting it cannot and will not enforce this law. After all, if a person who is not legally in this state can have his constitutional rights, so can the rest of us.
So, again, you've got State Representative Dan Calkins making the statement on the House floor in the aftermath of that ruling that we talked about 2 weeks ago and has made a whole bunch of headlines. And an interesting argument. And whether or not we're going to see the FOID card challenge in federal court proceed forward and whether or not this is going to be something used in that effort, we'll be tracking that, of course, as we've been tracking other litigation against firearm laws in the state of Illinois, including the Myers v. Kelly case, which is in the Southern District of Illinois, where you've got the plaintiffs challenging the state statute on a variety of grounds, and ultimately saying that prohibiting individuals from firearms is unconstitutional, including the use of the firearm owner ID card. And just looking at the docket in that case of Myers v. Kelly, You've got discovery that's going to be due by May 31st in that case. All right, so we're actually getting close to that. When we talked about this way back in October, May seemed like a far way away. But now we're rapidly approaching that, so we'll be watching that case closely as well. So on the issue of the non-citizens and firearms and non-citizens who could become police, if you recall, last year we also had this measure that was House Bill 3751. House Bill 3751 dealt with police officers and who could become police officers. And just looking at some of the language, what it did was it said that an individual against whom immigration action has been deferred by the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Service under the Deferred Action of Childhood Arrivals, the process is allowed to apply for the position of police officer or special policeman subject to specific requirements. And individuals who also have a work authorization in the country, even if they're foreign nationals, they can become police officers. But there was a little caveat in there. They would have to be able to carry firearms per state and federal law. So did Judge Brown's announcement here earlier this month that a non-citizen can have a firearm? Is that something that's going to play into this, allowing for non-citizens to have a firearm? It's an interesting question and something that State Representative John Cabello, he subsequently filed on Friday, House Bill 5790, that essentially reverses that. It says it restores certain provisions in the county's code and the Illinois Municipal Code concerning citizenship of employees of the Sheriff's Department and police officer applicants to the form in which they existed before their amendments by Public Act 103-357, which we just took a look at. So is that measure going to go anywhere? Cabello supported the previous measure, and it was actually supported by I believe the police union out of Chicago, because they've got a shortage of police applicants. They need more police officers. That was the thinking, but a lot of backlash, especially after this judge's ruling in this case. But I talked with Cabello on Friday to talk a little bit about the bill that he filed and also his concerns and also how this measure, the firearm owner ID card could be null and void after this federal judge's ruling saying that, non-citizenship status shouldn't be something prohibiting individuals from getting a FOID card. And when you look at what Illinois State Police told me on Friday, they confirm that in order to get a FOID card, one has to attest that they are not an alien who's unlawfully present in the United States. Again, they have to attest that they are not an alien who's unlawfully present in the United States. That's on the FOID card application. So back to the issue, though. Here's John Cabello, state representative, Republican from McKinsey Park, talking about the bill that he filed to reverse state statutes that allows for non-citizens to become police officers in the state of Illinois.
Wrong, at least in this case with an illegal. So what we decided to do after this radical judge decided to allow a non-citizen, a legal immigrant, to be able to possess a firearm, we got a little nervous about what she might do next. So we decided to file the bill to make sure that it can't happen. We cannot in any way, shape, or form have a non-citizen of the United States arrest citizens of the United States. The bill that was passed does not allow that. But with this radical judge, we got to make sure that we protect our citizens.
Other people looking at that measure from last year saw that it did allow for non-citizens to become police officers and possibly take the rights away from citizens. That was a big debate in the Illinois Senate before the measure passed. I remember clearly hearing State Senator Chapin raise that very issue, concerned that you're going to see non-citizens essentially have the right to take the rights away from legal citizens in this state. But when it comes to the firearm issue, Cabello was sure to say that this is just one person affected by this one ruling out of the Northern District of Illinois.
Well, it only applies to this one person. And apparently, I'm not an attorney, but I've heard from several of them that this one person is now able to possess a weapon. But it opens up such a huge Pandora's box now. Did she just say that our FOID card is null and void? If that is the case, I'm happy with that. Does that mean that you don't need a concealed carry card any longer? I'm happy with that. But again, it comes back to the point of a police officer must be a citizen of the United States, because we cannot have non-citizens arresting citizens.
And more from the representative.
Because what we did is we codified federal law saying that if you're a non-citizen, you can't possess a weapon. Now, this judge totally circumvented that. Granted, for that one person, but we can't allow that to happen.
So essentially, he's saying that the law that he supported last year codified that non-citizens who aren't allowed to have firearms can't be police officers, right? Because in order to be a police officer, you have to have the ability to carry a firearm. And it said in there, in the law that they passed last year, that a non-citizen who's got a work permit, who's able to carry a firearm by federal and state law, can become a police officer. Well, now he's filed a bill to essentially restore the previous provision of the law, saying that only United States citizens can become police officers. But again, back to the issue of the Northern District federal judge saying that the non-citizens' prohibition from having firearms is unconstitutional. Well, that, according to Republicans, as we heard from Dan Calkins and now from John Cabello and others, say that that's essentially saying that the FOID card is unconstitutional.
I think it's great because, I filed, I think I was the first person ever to file the void the FOID bill. But I think I started that back in 13 or 14. So I'm good with that part. But her ruling is going to be challenged by a higher court, and I firmly believe that they will say she's absolutely positively wrong, at least in this case with an illegal possessing a firearm.
Absolutely fascinating. Where do we go from here? We'll be watching it closely. Whether or not this measure from State Representative John Cabello actually advances, we shall see. But that's on top of a whole host of other things in the Second Amendment space, including on Friday, a lot of concern raised about this: the Justice Department launching the National Extreme Risk Protection Order Resources Center. The launch of the National Extreme Risk Protection Order Resource Center will provide the partners across the country valuable resources to keep firearms out of the hands of individuals who possess a threat to themselves or others. The establishment of the center is the latest example of the Justice Department's work to use every tool provided by the landmark Bipartisan Safer Communities Act to protect communities from gun violence. And you've got legislators in Washington, D.C. saying that this is some kind of national red flag type of law. So we'll see what happens in that space as well. It's Bishop on Air. Thanks for hanging out with me. What a ride. And we'll kind of take you on all the twists and turns as we go through it together, all right? So be sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. And follow me on X, on Facebook, and right here on YouTube.